North Korea is your most urgent problem. This was the message President Obama left for Trump as he was leaving office. Many presidents have tried to deal with North Korea. All have failed. Why? Why is North Korea so insane, so determined to keep its nuclear weapons and point them towards the US? Answers to those questions bring us back to 1945, in the last days of World War II. The Korean Peninsula had been formerly held by the Japanese Empire since 1910, but the defeat and surrender of Japan in 1945 divided Korea by the 38th parallel, with the Soviet Union occupying the north and the US occupying the south. This was the beginning of the two Koreas we know today. The north was subject to a communist iron grip, while the south would eventually democratize and become a capitalistic free nation. In 1948, the United Nations called for democratic elections nationwide. The Soviets refused to oblige, and free elections would have to continue in the southern part of the country only. On August 15th, the Republic of Korea was born, and on September 9th, a parallel process led to a communist dictatorship in the north, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. This new dictatorship would be led by the Soviet-backed Kim Il-sung, the first of the Kim family to rule North Korea. Already tensions were simmering, and it wouldn't take long for the Korean Peninsula to be center stage of world affairs. Both Koreas viewed each other as illegitimate, but one was ready to unify and spread the communist worldview down south. North Korea would invade the south on June 25, 1950. The north enjoyed early success, crossing the 38th parallel and capturing Seoul, and moving further down to Busan. But when the US joined the war, North Korea was pushed back deep into its own territory towards the Chinese border. This prompted the Chinese to join the war, fighting directly against the United States. The war dragged on, and a stalemate was reached near the 38th parallel. An armistice would be signed on July 27, 1953, effectively ending the war. Kim Il-sung came to an important realization at the end of the Korean War, one which had a connection to Korea's history. He understood that Korea had always been subject to larger powers. Just think of the war itself. The North's ability to carry out the war was made possible by two large socialist powers, the Soviet Union and China. Without them, it had no hope of reunification. Korea was once a tributary state of China, but when China was weakened and entered its century of humiliation in the 1800s, Korea suffered as well. This led to its annexation in 1910 by the Japanese Empire. Historically, Koreans were exploited by various powers, the Qing, Russian, and Japanese empires. The Soviet Union was just the latest addition. Kim Il-sung, with history as his teacher, decided that North Korea should embark on a new path. He called it Juche, or self-reliance. It is the belief that North Korea must remain a separate and distinct entity from the world. Depend on no one but yourself, and above all, have a reverence for your godlike leader. For Juche to work, North Korea would need two things: economic self-sufficiency and a strong military. So North Korea would become self-sufficient and prosperous, right? It opened itself up and became wealthy? No. In this decision, so too lie the seeds of North Korea's own destruction, and the answer to our questions. Self-reliance meant a strong military. Kim indexed heavily into that belief, so much so that North Korea would allocate a significant amount of resources to the military. The centrally planned economy emphasized heavy industry, which in turn required capital that North Korea just did not have. But Kim pushed his people towards this blatantly failing mix of communism and Juche. He kept doubling down on it, and his Stalinist strong cult of personality, control of the media, economy, and military offered little to no resistance. By the 1970s, the Sino-Soviet split led to Kim trying to play China and the Soviets against each other for his own benefit. But this backfired, and eventually aid to North Korea would lessen over time, leading to the end of the so-called economic miracle and a sharp economic decline. So how did Kim respond to this? He doubled down on self-reliance. No more aid from the Soviets. North Korea must continue to build up its military to establish true and lasting independence, he would say. Something else that would lessen over time was the communist world itself. Deng Xiaoping in China opened up the country and introduced economic reforms that would lead to a real economic miracle. And Gorbachev in the late 80s would introduce his policies of glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, which is known as restructuring. These would eventually bring about the dissolution of the Soviet Union. It seemed that the walls were closing in on Kim. Kim Il-sung died in 1994 and was succeeded by his son Kim Jong-il. One thing which Kim Jong-il accomplished, we could say, is becoming a nuclear-armed state on October 9, 2006, with its first nuclear test. North Korea spent decades building up its nuclear capabilities, and it makes sense. What could be more Juche than having nuclear weapons? So the reason why North Korea is so messed up starts with how it understands its own history. The answer to the problem of bigger fish trying to eat you was Juche, self-reliance. Its retreat into Juche, in my opinion, was a defense mechanism, a way to cope with the outside world, rooted in its own history. And it is not alone in this insecurity. Many other nations feel threatened by the international system and wish to overturn it to something more favorable to them. These states often band together and help each other in any way they can. China is also why North Korea continues to be the way it is. Just think of its present position. It is essentially a tributary state of China. China is North Korea's main trading partner and accounts for nearly all of its official trade. North Korea is extremely dependent on China for economic support. Ring a bell? Just like in the Cold War, it has gone back to first base, where it was during the Korean War, at the mercy of those old empires. When we look at it this way, we are confronted by the truth of the situation, and that truth Korea has known for a millennium. No matter the empire and its specific characteristics, North Korea thinks it can never be safe in the international system. It feels threatened. This explains its paranoia, its incessant desire to bolster its military, test missiles, and keep its nuclear weapons at all costs. Nukes are North Korea's deterrence policy against foreign aggression. US presidents must first understand this historical reality, something which they have been reluctant to do in the past in other regions of the world, such as the Middle East. And the incoming president does not seem to offer much hope. He wants short-term deals. You have to deal with the problem as it is, and the problem in large part is China. And you can't do a short-term deal with China on the issue of North Korea. How would China feel if right on its doorstep, just as in the Cold War, the entire Korean peninsula became a US forward base for operations into China? China is thus heavily invested in propping up North Korea, hence the complexity and reason why no one has been able to solve the North Korea problem. The story of the two Koreas is a tragedy. The Korean people north of the 38th parallel deserve better. Just look at what they have been able to accomplish when given the opportunity to do so. But there is a reason why this problem has persisted for numerous presidential administrations, and will likely continue to. But maybe Trump can continue to grow his special and close relationship with Kim Jong-un, and find a way to get North Korea to denuclearize. We will soon find out. But I want to know what you think about North Korea. Do you think there's any hope? Crazier things have happened in our world, and sometimes all of a sudden when we least expected it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell to be notified for more content like this. Thanks for watching.